Hockey's a dumb sport sometimes. You get boat raced by the Flyers for 2 straight games. Both games, probably the Sabres don't deserve to win. And then they come out and totally flip the script on the Leafs on the second half of a back-to-back with travel. Isn't it just such a dumb sport sometimes?
It really is.
It's always the Flyers, too. It always seems like they have our number. Where it's like I said, complete flip of the script with the Leafs.
I feel like every game we play is almost a trap game. I can't believe I got tickets to that game, man. I was sitting in the 100s, and it was awful. If you guys listen to BST Pod with John, Max, and Hagen, and JP occasionally, I don't know if Max has ever told this story, but it was about the time he bought. He had the best seats of his life at the Bills game. This was 2 years ago. He had 50-yard line, 4 rows up on the Bills sideline, and it was the game Jonathan Taylor absolutely torched the entire team, and they just got run out of the stadium. Best seats of his life. It's the same feeling. I mean, probably on a lesser scale for me, just because those tickets for a Bills game are way more expensive. But yeah, it sucks. It sucks.
At least with that story, you're losing to a playoff opponent and not Samuel Urson.
That name.
How do you beat the Goat Heads twice in regulation?
I'm gonna take a stand on this, and this is gonna be a stand that most people don't like. The Goat Head, the Goat Head stigma that they can't lose or they're always great in the Goat Heads. I don't believe in any of that.
Well, it's right versus 13 other teams.
I just don't believe in any of it. It's just I get it, and people kind of like to make their little cliches and everything, but I do not believe it for a second. And the people who actually take it to the next step and are like, they should just go to the red and black full time, man. They just go to the red and black full time. No, I don't. And didn't we have this conversation last podcast?
I was gonna say
we're spiraling.
It's Christian.
Already.
It's Christian versus the fan base. Anyways. Welcome back to another episode of the Sabre Roundtable. My name is Jonah.
And I'm Christian.
And we have 3 very, different games to talk about. I guess if we want to jump right into it, you could probably pair those 2 Flyers wins together because it was the same story, just with different results.
It was the same game both nights. It's just the game that was supposed to happen, the second game, should have happened 2 times. They got lucky the first game.
They did. And I think it's only right when we talk about that first game, we should talk about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. That he stole that game for them on, Wednesday night. He played great. The Sabres got boat raced for 3 straight periods, and were somehow able to come away with a victory.
And you know what? And we gave him his kudos for that. We did. We were like, he played great. I completely agree. He did play good.
That said,
it's not changing anything.
Not even
all.
that. Not even that. Just the fact that if you logged on to Twitter after that game, there are apology forms all over the timeline. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen apology forms after 2.5 games of good hockey, of good performance from him.
Don't you think it's funny that this fan base, it really surprises me sometimes, because for a fan base that's as smart as the Sabres fan base is, especially with a team that's always been, at least since Twitter's been relevant, has been perpetually bad. Usually bad teams breed the smartest fans. They're the most rational, and you know what? They dig deeper, and they're more into analytics. They're inclined to look at that kind of thing.
And stuff. It feels like the Sabres community gets ahead on narratives.
Right. But it just surprises me that they do this 180 sometimes. It's not
even a 180. It's just more so they're like Luukkonen. There's some sort of.
We saw this so many. We've talked about this. Multiple podcasts have talked about this. This has been a narrative on Twitter for the longest time. Is that UPL shows up for a few games and then he reverts back to the pumpkin he is. And surprise, surprise, after 2 games, he reverted back to the pumpkin again, and he laid an egg at home. And after the second game where he had a really good performance, when those apology forms were going around on Twitter, I hated it. I didn't even want to go on the app. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to interact with Sabre's Twitter at all. That's how much I despised it because I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah, you knew there was some sort of overreaction with that because look, 2 great games by Luukkonen, but we saw this last year, and Christian's right. We saw this how he had that great 2 to 3 week stretch in December to January where, he was stealing this team games on the West Coast and with depleted lineups. And you're thinking, okay, this is it. This is our starting goalie. Levi's on the way, but this guy can at least bridge the time over to that. And then he starts getting more starts, and his second half of the season was not good. Probably cost his team a playoff spot. And all I've been saying is that I've never said I don't think he's an NHL caliber goalie. If I have, my stance has changed. I think he is one. He's just he's not going to be a starter.
No,
I don't think he is.
Nope, I agree with you on that.
If he can do that, what he did against the Avalanche and against the Flyers, where he's the backup goalie, comes in every few games, and can just get the job done, then that's all you need from him. But how much longer until, I guess, the narrative changes on him with portions of the fan base? Because he has his truthers, we all know. And, we are definitely not on that side of the conversation. But how long until it's acknowledged universally that he's probably never going to be what he was drafted to be, 6 years ago now?
Mm-hmm.
He can be a backup. I think he can be, because those 2 games that we saw from him, that was a different Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen than what we saw for most of last season. But as soon as he got that third start, as soon as he was starting to get more and more time and more reps, he kind of, I don't want to say fell apart, because look, it wasn't a good performance on home ice against the Flyers. It wasn't. We all know.
So bad.
A few of those goals, 1 or 2 of them were breakaways.
Yeah.
But, the Flyers had 19 shots on goal, and 5 of them went in. That's not a good night. It's not.
No.
You can say the team played like whatever adjective you want to say. You got to lump UPL in there. You just have to.
Wait, you said it was 5 goals on 19 shots?
I believe it was 5 on 19.
5 on 19.
So what's that, like a 760 save percentage, something like that?
737, which
not,
is under Carter Hutton.
It's not a good night. So I think moving forward, just because I don't know when Comrie's going to be back, it's going to be a little bit. I'm not saying Levi has 100% earned the crease. We can talk about his performance in Toronto. He obviously didn't hamper the team, but he didn't exactly close the door on Toronto. They were in that game till the end. I just think UPL, if you want to get the best UPL, I think that he has to be used sparingly.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy he's a relief pitcher, You rotate him in every now and then, but your starting guy, your big dog is Levi. That's what I personally think as of right now. And you could reevaluate when Comrie comes back, see where his share of the workload's is gonna be. But as of right now, I mean, watching Levi last night, I mean, it wasn't night and day. Obviously, as you were saying, like he didn't close the door on the Leafs until the end. I mean, again, 3 of the goals were Austin Matthews, and he's probably one of the best goal scorers in the league. But I just feel like when Levi's in net, as a fan watching, I'm just much more comfortable with him being in there and not having it be UPL.
Let's talk about that game against the Leafs. Huge turnaround for this team.
Yeah. How many turnarounds is this? This has to be turnaround 8.
But you come off that horrible loss to the Flyers, And now the doubts are starting to trickle back in. Now the scoring went away for another night. And, even against the Flyers in the first game, it kind of, they buried some goals, but the offensive generation wasn't really there where you wanted it to be. Now the narratives are starting to creep back in. Now I'm scrolling on Twitter and I'm seeing some people question Don Granato and Kevin Adams as a whole. And that's a whole nother discussion.
A discussion we shouldn't be having right now.
Yeah, not 12 games.
No.
12 games into the season. Absolutely not. But obviously the vibes are starting to dwindle a little bit. And I would say that win did kind of get things back on track, for lack of a better term.
How many times have we been back on track this year?
I mean, they have.
One of our episodes is named Back on Track.
They finally win. They finally win 2 consecutive games, but then they lose again. Like, it's just back and forth with this team. That's just what they are.
Remember at the beginning of the year, I was talking about how they needed to just get the engine started. Like they lost the first 2 games. And I was just like, all this team needs to do is get that engine started, and this is going to be rolling along. This is like driving a stick shift car with someone who doesn't know how to drive a stick shift car, and it keeps stalling, and you have to keep restarting the engine, and you have to keep shifting it back to first gear, pressing the clutch, and then going, and then it stalls out on you again, and you have to restart the car. That's what this is right now. It's not fun to watch because I have no idea where to sit with this team right now. I don't know what's going on.
I don't know where you pulled that analogy out of, but it's spot on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's funny because I'm just like, oh my God, man. It's like they're.
I tweeted something out after the Flyers loss, and I said, basically, this team doesn't have a lineup that has stuck yet. When the Sabres were playing their best hockey last year, you knew basically where everybody slotted in. You had your top line. You had the kid line. Middlestat, Olofsson, Jost was basically your third line. Mm-hmm. And then you had Krebs, Okposo, and Girgensons. Like, that was your forward lineup for most of the season. Greenway comes in towards the end. They lose a little bit, so things are getting jumbled. But for the bulk of the season, when they were winning games, that was their lineup. And same with the defense pairs. Like, you knew who your top 4 was. Now, nothing's really set in stone through 12 games.
Yeah.
It's been shuffling all over the place. Against Toronto, they went 11-7 because
that was an interesting call. That was a really interesting call.
So they just have struggled to find that lineup, and you can't even say after the Toronto game that they found it because Cousins didn't play.
Nope. Quinn is still out.
Quinn's still out, and Samuelson's on IR now. So they rolled 7 defensemen. They're still trying to find it. But what I will say after that Toronto game is, I think the top line inevitably found its way back to each other. Skinner, Thompson, Tuck, I think that's what you should roll with for now.
Yeah, you should keep them together.
They got off. Remember they were together at the start of the year. Tuck wasn't going. Tage wasn't going. The line just wasn't clicking as a whole. Now, Tage has 9 points in his last 4 games. Tuck has 8 points in his last 4 games. Skinner's been scoring throughout. It's time. At least reunite them for now. Get a reliable line that you can depend on offensively, because right now, believe it or not, they need offense to get going.
Yeah,
here.
Believe it or not, for once the defense isn't the main problem with this team. Sometimes it's just putting the puck in the net, which is a little confusing. It's like how does it flip like this? But whatever. I'm itching for Quinn to get back. I know it's probably going to be another 2 months. I really want him back in this lineup because I'm curious to see what they do with the lineup, because another person's going to have to come out, probably Jost. Olofsson will probably be sitting there at that point. But I want him back. I want to see how he does coming off this injury. I think he could really contribute to this team in a positive way.
I want to talk about how the forwards closed the game in Toronto. Like we said, they went 11-7. By the third period, it was not so much 11 forwards. They were rolling 9.
Yeah.
And the 2 forwards that saw themselves on the outside were Peyton Krebs and Victor Olofsson. They each had one shift in the third period.
One of which you could say isn't surprising, but the other one you could say is a little more surprising.
Exactly. Victor Olofsson, we know where he stands with this team. It stinks because I feel like I've seen more of an effort from him this season. I feel like I've seen like he is playing like he knows he has to try to get into this lineup. I don't want to say he's become obsolete because that feels like a very harsh word to use for him, but he just, I don't know. I think
it's not working.
It's not working out.
It's not.
And Granato doesn't trust him. Peyton Krebs, he's a different conversation. Make no mistake, he has not had a good start to the year. Through the 3 seasons he's been in the NHL, the offense, we're still waiting for it to come through. And even up to his own defensive standards that he'd established last year, he's been pretty mediocre. And him being benched in service of Girgensons and Okposo still getting a bulk of shifts, that's kind of telling.
Yeah.
And I want to open up this conversation to what do they do with him moving forward?
I mean, the obvious answer is what we've been saying for the past few weeks is that he's going to turn himself. If he's going to be a part of this team, he's going to be the next Zemgus Girgensons. He's going to be a fourth-line guy. He's going to get fourth-line minutes. He's going to play well. He's going to try and play well defensively. He's going to be on that forechecking line. He's going to get in deep. He's going to win those dirty puck battles down in the offensive zone, and he's going to hope for a chance or two out front. I don't know if this team is in a position where they want something like that anymore. I feel as though you always want, again, you want good defense on your team, but me personally, when I've seen Okposo and Girgensons on the ice, at least that line as a whole, and this is something I keep coming back to in my mind, like they have their value, but it comes to a point where it's just like, get them off the ice. We need offense, especially when this team is struggling offensively. They're the last guys you want to see touch the ice.
Let me ask this question. What do you think the Sabres want Peyton Krebs to be? What do they project him as?
Do you want like if this was a conversation between like GM and Krebs, like what this is like what they
let's
want
say
to
no.
be?
Let's say it's Peyton Krebs is not in the room. This is because if you're a GM, if you're a coach, you're gonna talk up the player if he's right in front of you. I'm talking about Kevin Adams, Don Granato, whoever. They're in the room alone, and they're talking about what is Peyton Krebs in 3, 4, 5 years, even this season. What is he? What do you want him to be?
With this team, as of what I've seen right now, I was gonna go with a fourth line guy who gets 20 points a year.
You think they want him to be that?
I think they want him to be first and foremost reliably in the defensive zone, because it seems like they like that kind of line that has a solid defensive structure to it, but they also want him to bury the puck more than Girgensons and Okposo have done. So they probably want him to be a shutdown fourth liner who can give you maybe 10 goals a year, 20, 25 points, something like that. Not a big minute eater, something like, 15 minutes a night, if that. And
I was trying to point you in a different direction. I really wanted you to say, I think they want him to be their third line center that can play up and down the lineup. I wanted you to say that.
Maybe I kind of talked myself. Maybe that's kind of what I want.
No. Because here's the thing. It's totally logical why you came to that conclusion. The reason I wanted to point you in that direction is because all throughout his development, he's had the offensive tools. He was the key part of one of the biggest trades in franchise history. So I was trying to point you in the direction that they want him to be higher in the lineup. I wanted you to say that they want him to be their third line guy, preferably maybe. But what I wanted to say is the conclusion you got to is that they want him to be, or is that they're slating him to be the fourth line center because they just won't get him away from Girgensons and Okposo.
Yeah.
Last year, he starts out with Cousins and Peterka. 2 to 3 games, does pretty well. Then he succumbs to the forward rotation that they had going early that year with Quinn, and Rasmus Asplund was a part of it. And he comes back, and then he gets put in that spot with Okposo and Girgensons. And they clearly liked him in that role, and the three of them were very good last year as a line. But, man, it seems like there's no opportunity for upward mobility with him.
Yeah.
It feels like they can't get him away. And even this year, he had that one game with Cousins and Peterka against Tampa Bay. Nothing happened with that line offensively, but nothing happened with that line defensively.
It was like an idling line almost. They were just not doing much.
But they weren't
around.
they weren't doing much, but they weren't giving up much.
Which is fine. That's fine in certain games.
But my point is that didn't last.
Right, yeah.
He's immediately back with Girgensons and Okposo.
So not only is that the reason why I came to that conclusion, the other thing is with the offensive talent that we see in this organization with certain guys that are definitely going to get called up, I think like it just might not be his choice. Like, because I mean, you already have Thompson, Cousins, Mitz. I mean, Mitz has been rotating at wing a little bit.
Not this year. He's been their son. He's honestly probably been their best forward.
So that's yeah. I completely agree with that argument.
So it's not, and I don't want to say like this is the end of the world. Like if Peyton Krebs doesn't work out,
it is what it is.
It is what it is. Your center spine is fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, given what Krebs was once thought to be and what he was a part of when he was brought over here, it's weird that they're not trying to figure out what he is, especially given that there is so much rotation in the forward group already, yet he doesn't find himself a part of it.
Doesn't find himself on the first line, anything like that.
And given that there's a big forward injury, Jack Quinn has been out.
Yeah.
It seems like in a time where the Sabres are trying to find their mojo offensively, that he hasn't even been given the chance to be a part of that. And here's the funny thing, I'm not even saying he deserves it, because like we said, he's not had a good start.
No, but now is 100% the time to do that, because going back to your point you made with that Skinner-Thompson Tuck line, you think that should be, they found their way back to each other, that should be the line now. When Quinn comes back, that kid line is probably going to get reunited, so that's just less room for him to even move up and down the lineup. So if you want to figure this out, you should do it now, while Quinn is still injured.
We're going to get to a point when Quinn comes back that there's going to be spots in the lineup that are going to be up for grabs because, the forward lineup, it's not set right now, obviously.
Not at all.
But you basically, let's say that's your top six again. You got Thompson, Skinner, Tuck. Then you got the kid line. You got Middlestead and Greenway probably on the third line together. Okposo and Girgensons are probably going to play for the most part. So basically you have 2 forward spots left, and that's going to be between Krebs, Olofsson if he's still here, and someone like Yuri Kulik who's still knocking on the door.
Dude, he is kicking the door down. I need this dude up here. I want him to play a few games.
Here's my question. Do you think at any point this season Krebs gets scratched?
Yes.
You think he does?
Yes.
Unequivocally?
What do you mean by unequivocally?
Like, you think he's going to get scratched?
So, like, just
you would put money down that he gets scratched.
Yes, and it's not for the reason of like calling someone up or anything. It's just because he's getting scratched.
A healthy scratch, like how Granato healthy scratches Jost pretty often, something like that.
I'd say there's more of a chance than not that he's healthy scratched at some point during the season, and Kulik should be getting games this year, considering how he's playing. That's just going to boost those odds. Odds boost right there.
I'm hesitant just because of kind of what I've talked about, how, he was a part of that Eichel trade, obviously, and the high pedigree he once had, but I wouldn't be surprised if it happened, which is it's kind of sad in a way, if he really is like the first miss of the rebuild here. How, worst case scenario, he's probably their fourth line center.
Yeah.
It just would, it stinks when prospects don't become what you once projected them to be. Okay, let's move off of Peyton Krebs. Do we want to touch on our favorite subject, the power play?
Jonah, it's all you. The floor is yours.
Well, I thought I was pleasantly surprised to see Middlestat in the bumper these past 2 games. I thought there was some decent puck movement there. The second power play unit even scored a goal the other night against Toronto.
Yeah.
That said, that 5-on-3 against Toronto for a minute and a half, yikes. That was pretty bad.
I wasn't surprised, honestly.
And
I kind of saw it.
Isn't that like the problem here?
It is the problem.
It has just become, it's officially a weakness of the team.
Mm-hmm.
It's hurting them. They're 27th in the league in conversion rate. They don't look good. I can't remember the last time the first unit scored a goal. I think the Ottawa game.
I could not tell you.
I mean, that's 4 or 5 games ago. It's not good. And I think I'm past the point where I'm just asking for personnel changes. Like, yes, I'm asking for personnel changes, but Middlestat in the bumper didn't solve things. And moving Skinner to the wall didn't solve things. It's still the same power play, just with different guys. And I think it's time for a more philosophical shift in terms of like how they run it. And we tweeted out today, I think one way to start doing this, if you threw Tage Thompson on the other side, at least just get him off the one-timer side. Teams know what you're trying to do. And I mean, when you think of Tage Thompson scoring goals, do you think of one, like obviously he scores one-timers, but what does he score more with?
It's more of it's the quick release.
Yes.
It is the quick release. It's the patience and the quick release.
So ideally, you would want more of that, right?
Yeah. I think, as funny as it is to say this, I really think that Columbus game did us in on the power play. Because every team will look back to that game and be like, if you leave this guy open, he is going to bury the puck on most of the one-timers he gets because he's sitting in the OV spot. And now they're just like, I don't care who is over there, but you're not going 10 feet away from him. You stay near that guy and you make sure he can't take one-timers. So I think you're right. I think there needs to be some sort of philosophical change with the way they run this thing.
And this has been something I've been advocating for a little bit because he is red hot right now. How much longer will it take for JJ Peterka to get a promotion to the top unit?
Man, he's cooking.
He's their, fourth leading scorer right now, I think.
Mm-hmm.
He's been dynamite. He had 2 points against Toronto. Should have had more. He was all over the ice. How much longer will it take for them to just give him a shot? Give him a shot.
I feel like he'd be a really good bumper guy.
He could be one. Or, look at how he scored his goal the other night on the left side.
Yeah.
You could have him and Tage on alternating wings and I don't know, change some things. It's not even like last year they were able to hide behind a great conversion rate because Tage was shooting like 35%.
Shooting Bender was crazy.
Until like January, February. And the power play finished brutally, but by the end they had gone from 5th in the league to 10th. So you're saying, oh, we had a great power play this year, even though it basically fell off the face of the earth the second half of the season. Now there's nothing to hide behind. Just look at the raw numbers. Look at the raw conversion percentage. It's not good.
It's under 10%, right?
It's under 10%.
What is it, like 8?
It's like 9 point something. I'm sure the Peterka goal bumped it up a little bit.
Thank God we have a good penalty kill. I'm so happy when this team takes penalties, I grin.
Where would this team be without a good penalty kill?
Shorthanded goal last night.
They would probably be like 2-3 games under 500.
Yeah.
And it flips the other way. If they had a good power play, you're talking 2-3 games over 500.
Yep.
It has failed to help them out when they need a little bit. There's teams in the NHL that are power play merchants. You look at the Edmonton Oilers. You look at even New Jersey this season. If the power play steps up when your 5-on-5 play is kind of mediocre at the moment, guess what? It'll still win you games. And there's way too much firepower on this team for it to be this bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're alongside Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis, all these teams that don't have as much talent as them. Honestly, surprisingly, Washington's down here, which, whenever you think Ovechkin, you think about power play goals. Dallas is down here. San Jose's 18th, which is kind of remarkable when you think about it. That's probably the one good story they got going for them right now.
That's probably where most of their goals come from. I mean, if it's 18th, I'd like to see how many goals they have at 5-on-5.
Yeah,
it's got to be really, really, really low.
Yeah.
And what, they've played 11 games now?
Mm-hmm.
We'll touch more on them later.
You can't hide behind the raw numbers anymore. Or you can't hide behind raw conversion rate anymore. It's not good. And it's going to continue to lose this team games.
Mm-hmm.
So the Tage thing is it's a suggestion. I just want to see some type of change. I know Middlestat got there, but teams were not respecting Jeff Skinner as a shooting or passing option. He was faking one-timers and people weren't even flinching. It needs kind of an overhaul.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I love Jeff Skinner as a player, and that goal he had last night against Toronto, rock star goal, but he's just a pure 5-on-5 guy. I just don't. He should be on the second unit. Move him to the second unit. Move JJ up to the first. See what happens. Easy. That's a start. If you're not going to make a full philosophical overhaul, which I could see why you wouldn't, just because you're in the middle of the season. That's a start. Just flip some guys around. And I know Mitz got there, but anyway, I digress.
Before we get off of these last 3 games, quick shout out to Ryan Johnson.
Yeah, he had his first NHL point last night. Love to see it.
Didn't get a ton of ice time, but
it's been a long time coming for him.
You look at that goal, that's what he brings. He escapes from the Toronto forechecking, creates a lane, finds Jeff Skinner for an outlet pass, boom, goal. That's what he brings.
I don't like to prey on injuries, but this Matthias Samuelsson going to IR and giving Johnson a shot, this could be good for the defensive core. They might, if he plays well enough, he might play himself into a rotational spot above Bryson.
I think it's very telling that they played him in the first place.
Yeah. I think they want him on this team. The question is, when Samuelsson comes back, who comes out? If let's say in this scenario they want Johnson in the lineup, who comes out for him?
I don't know yet. You have to talk to me when he plays another 5-6 games. I'll say that.
If you talked to me at the beginning of the season, I would have easily said Yoki. That when the 6 guys are in there, Power, Samuelsson, Dahlin, Clifton, Johnson, and Yoki. Those 6 guys are in there, and you want to slot the other Johnson and Johnson. You want to slot the other Johnson in there. Who comes out? So like I said, at the beginning of the season, I would have said Yoki, but he's been playing good. So who would you?
No clue. Honestly.
No clue. Yeah,
I don't know.
The defense isn't the problem of this team right now.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll get there. Like I said, I want to see more from him. Hopefully he gets a game where he's playing consistently and not having to deal with 6 other defensemen alongside him. Okay, let's jump to the Amherst. We really should give more props to. They're doing really well this season. But let's get to the first bit of news we got earlier this week. Zach Benson to IR. He sustained some type of injury against the Avalanche. Is it a real injury or not? I don't know. And what I mean when I say that is, here's the timeline for him. He's going to have his time on the IR. Then when he becomes eligible to come off of it, he can do a conditioning stint in the AHL with the Amherst. That can be 2 weeks. And then by that time, theoretically, you're headed around mid-December, late December, and that's when the World Juniors starts. So it's kind of a convenient bridge for Benson. And I do want, and that very well could be the last we see of him in a Sabre sweater this season.
Yeah. It was good. He was really well defensively.
You saw flashes. He was very well defensively. He's got to develop the offensive game.
He's 18.
Inevitably, he's got to get stronger. He's got to get quicker. But it was a good look at what is to come for him.
Yeah.
He's definitely got a pretty bright future with this team.
It was extremely promising. So, yeah, if this is the last we see of him in a Sabres uniform this season, I think he made the most of his opportunity.
And it's just cool we got to see it. It's
Yeah.
not something you expected.
Yeah, absolutely not, especially before like the rounds of guys you've drafted in the years prior, Roseanne, Kulik, Savoy, Osland, who's he's
still in Europe.
He's
yeah.
in Europe right now, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, like even those guys, it's like it's
Mhm.
kind of crazy that the
Yeah,
guy you
he
drafted
leapfrog-
this year jumped right into the
He
lineup.
leapfrog all of them.
Yeah.
So now that Benson is on IR, you have a compelling situation. Matthew Savoy, his conditioning stint is over. Finishes with 5 points in 6 games with the Amerks. Pretty good showing. They have to make a decision with him. And then you have Yuri Kulik, who is absolutely torching the AHL right now. He's 19 years old, and he has 9 goals and 13 points.
That's ludicrous.
That's insane.
That's ludicrous.
So here comes a debate. You can tell who's more NHL ready. You can. It's not a knock on Savoy. 5 points in his first 6 pro games. That's good stuff. That's what you wanted to see from Savoy. I think any sane person would acknowledge that Kulik is more ready right now. But inevitably, the decision with Savoy has to be made.
Right, because it's either that or you send him back to the WHL. The rule is so dumb. It's so dumb.
He's clearly ready for the AHL, but he's in that weird state where he's probably not ready for the NHL.
Does he have to play a full season in the W again? Or is it one game?
I think it's that or until he turns 20. I don't even know.
Ugh.
I don't care to know. It's such a dumb rule. In any case, what do you think they do here?
They'll call Savoy up. It'll be Savoy. I mean,
which is not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing at all. And from a personnel decision, it makes sense. And also, you did draft the guy higher than Kulik. I understand that Kulik is obviously more NHL ready right now. But I mean, hey, he's running the table right now down in the AHL. Let him keep doing it for a little while. See where you're at with Savoy, and then after you reevaluate with him, then maybe call him up. It's a long season. There's time for all of this. And again, it could go back into that bridge thing where you could maybe get him to the World Juniors.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we talked about this last episode because we knew decision week was looming. We just didn't expect Benson to go to IR. Savoy, if you kind of load manage him and play the full 9 games, that'll probably get you to the World Junior camp.
Yeah.
And I would assume they send him back unless he torches the NHL in his 9 or so game stints. But, man, it's such a tough argument to keep Kulik down at this point. He's been cooking down in the AHL. He has just been unreal for a kid his age. His second pro season, and he's topping the leaderboards.
If I was playing against that guy, I'd be scared out of my mind lining up against him on a face-off. For a 19-year-old dude, he looks like a grown man, like a grown 28-year-old man. And yeah, he's lighting it up, and he deserves a shot. So, I mean, I'd love to see it happen sooner rather than later, but on the basis of a personnel decision, I think they do call Savoy up first, but we'll see in the coming months what happens. But
it's inevitable. You can't keep Kulik down for much longer.
I honestly think when Kulik, the time he gets called up, he's not going back down. He will not be sent back to the AHL.
It'll be interesting because, okay, so like if Savoy gets you to Christmas, let's say, or to the World Juniors, that's December, and let's say you call Kulik up by that point, how much longer until like Quinn is ready?
Quinn might be ready at that time.
So they'll be, they can be concurrent events, but at the same time, if you reunite the kid line and keep the top line together, then Kulik is getting probably third line ice time with Middlestad or Greenway, which is not a bad role. It's just he almost gives off the impression he can help the top 6 right now.
Yeah.
He just seems like that type of contributor, and I don't want to say he would be in a bad spot if that's what they did with him, if they played him on the third line, but I would love to see him get opportunity now. But the Savoy thing provides a pretty valid excuse.
Yep.
Okay. Let's hop around the NHL. The Ottawa Senators have had a pretty interesting week.
We're back to the Senators again.
It's like a soap opera.
We should just have another segment on this show. Just
what's
going on with the Ottawa Senators?
What is up in Ottawa? The Pierre Dorion era is over. Pierre Dorion loses his, well, officially he resigns, or it was a mutual exit. But that Dadonov fiasco that we mentioned last week came to fruition. The Senators will lose a first-round pick, whether it's next year or the two after.
The rumor is that it's going to be next year's first-round pick.
Well, if you're Ottawa, you think, oh, we're going to be good and we're going to be better than we are in 2024 and then in the next 2 years.
It's what the streets are saying.
Per the streets.
Yeah.
So Pierre Dorion gets fired. So that's a huge change. How often do you see GMs fired in the first month of the season? Michael Andlauer, the Ottawa Senators owner, then has a press conference with the firing, and he's just dropping bars all throughout.
Why I inherited all of this is beyond me. Like, Jesus, man.
Like, you talk about a guy, like, yeah, he's been part of the Canadians owners, like he had a share in that ownership, so he's kind of been around the NHL. But for a new owner to do this soon, it's kind of baller. I respect it. The one quote he had about Shane Pinto and how he said, you look at a kid like Shane Pinto who's earning thousands and thousands of dollars of money but not playing hockey currently and is just kind of sitting around. And then you turn on the TV and Wayne Gretzky is promoting MGM. What do you think a kid like that is going to do? And it's like, man.
He's right.
He's right.
He is right.
He's right in that regard. So I kind of respect that, but it's so much fun to watch.
It is.
It has been so much. It's just been so interesting. You don't see this type of stuff. It's such a flair for the dramatic,
No. They haven't been very good. They've been very mediocre.
And that's the other thing. They start out 3-1. They've gone 1-5 since.
Oof.
And now they sit at the bottom of the Atlantic, and they lose in regulation to the Tampa Bay Lightning in pretty ugly fashion, and some things happened. The crowd had some choice words about Coach DJ Smith. Basically, they do not want to see him continue to have employment in the organization anymore.
That's putting it nicely.
And they made that opinion heard during the game at various points.
And Brady Tkachuk had something to say about that.
Brady Tkachuk had, the players on the bench certainly heard the noise.
The beautiful noise.
And Brady Tkachuk said it was BS. He didn't like it, let's say. He thinks it was kind of, he wants the crowd to have their back. They're not playing well, and he would prefer that they're not chanting to fire the head coach.
Yeah, which is what every NHL team wants. At least, the ones that want to be successful. But, it's not how it works all the time, man.
You're 1-5.
Yeah.
You, depending on who you ask, you were supposed to make the playoffs last year. And you were definitely supposed to make them this year. And you're 4-6, 1-5 in your last 6. And you just fired your GM this week. One of your young rookies just got suspended. Like, it's been a soap opera.
Yeah.
And, fans are going to be displeased. There was so much hope when Andlauer bought the team, and it's just fallen through so quickly.
It is really interesting to watch. I'm wondering what's going to happen on the next segment of what's going on in Ottawa. But it is sad that we will never get another summer of Pierre. Those were always fun. But all good things must come to an end.
I think it's time for another edition of This Team Stinks. And if it were a perfect world, it would be a different team every week.
We're going 2 for 2, baby. Back to back.
There is no doubt that the San Jose Sharks stink.
They stink.
They stink.
It is really bad. Good Lord. Not only losing 10-1 to the Vancouver Canucks, but running it back the next game and losing 10-2 to the Pittsburgh Penguins. That hasn't been done in the last 58 years of NHL hockey. That's how bad that is. They have a minus 17 goal differential over the last 2 games played. And again, the team is stripped of talent, but this is historic. And I could say without a doubt that this team stinks.
Let me take you through this. Picture this. You're a parent. You have a kid that's a San Jose hockey fan, but you live kind of far away, so you don't get to go to any games really. And your kid, he's never been to a hockey game before. And so you plan this family trip, and you're all excited to go. You make a nice sign that says it's going to be your first NHL game, and you get to the arena, and your kid has to watch their favorite team lose 10-2 in his first ever live appearance.
Oh my God.
What does that car ride home look like? What do you tell your child?
Oh man, it's got to be a car ride of silence, mostly silence. It is. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. That's awful. Like I was at the Flyers game with my girlfriend, and we've gone to 2 games, and both games have been losses. We went to the Bruins game last year. They lost 3-1, and then we went to this game. They get scored on twice right off rip. I was leaving the game. I was like, I'm so sorry. I wish it was. She's like, no, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's just these things happen. I'm like, but it's almost remorseful. It's like you bought the ticket. It's like if you're the parent, you got to apologize to the kid.
Do you remember last season? Do you remember the Dallas game? Remember there was that one fan from Europe that came to watch, and it was their first game?
Yeah.
That's like the worst.
It hurts.
But at least that person's like a grown adult. What do you say to your child after that?
That's a fandom that needs to be repaired.
I feel bad. Like they have no cup to hang this on.
No.
Like they didn't. It's like the Sabres in 14-15. Like the previous core did not get anything done. So you can't even.
They came close a few times.
You can't sulk in the glory of the past.
Nope.
Man.
You have nothing.
Yeah. And worst of all, it's happening in a year where there's no generational prospect. Like Celebrini, Yzerman, good prospects, good enough to tank for. Not good enough to go through this.
No. 10-1 is unbelievable.
For people that disagree with the tank, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the opinion that the tank failed. But if there is one argument I think there is to be made where the Sabres, for example, took a misstep, it was putting key players through that season. Putting a 19-year-old Ristolainen through that, putting a 20-year-old Gergensons and Grigorenko through that. They were core pieces for the future, and look at how they turned out. San Jose has William Eklund on that team. I'm pretty sure Thomas Bordeleau's on that team. They have young pieces, and if this is how it's going to continue...
The confidence is shot.
Confidence is shot. It's not a good development environment. It's just not. It's a tough spot to be in. Yeah,
it could screw up prospects, and you make a good point. That could have been a case for why some of our guys didn't pan out the way we wanted them to. So, if you're gonna, which means if you're gonna tank now, send your big boys down and send the guys you can down, or send them somewhere else, and then just tank.
I'll speak for JP here. If they want some scoring, the Sabres do have a Swedish winger that could help out with that.
That is true.
Here's a stat for San Jose. They currently have the second worst save percentage by a team in the NHL. They do not have the worst. That belongs to the Edmonton Oilers somehow.
That's insane.
The Oilers are now, 2-7-1?
Yeah.
They are not exactly in a spot where they can have the Sabres COVID season, like where just everything goes wrong. They cannot have that this year.
No.
They cannot have that.
No, not by any stretch, especially when you got Leon and McDavid on there. Like, no.
And by all accounts, they're on their way to it.
I'm curious to what's going to happen with that team if the season keeps going the way it is. When is Kenny Money out? When is he getting tossed out of Edmonton. It's probably sooner rather than later. I think the organization has had its fair shake of him. He hasn't gotten it done. They have not gotten it done. Especially if you have McDavid and Draisaitl, consistently the guys who get the most points in the league, and you can't get it done, I don't know what to tell you.
And they're both off to pretty mediocre starts compared to what we know them as, and look what's happening. They're falling apart. Now, this is mostly on the goaltending. An .867 team save percentage, you can't win like that. You can't. But it comes down to, what do they do now?
Well, it's a good thing you signed Jack Campbell to that 5-year contract. And your backup prospect that wasn't he a Calder, finalist?
Yeah.
Is
just as bad.
Yeah, probably. You should probably, ship him to Siberia at this point. It's crazy how quick these goalies could change up on you.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, a save percentage like that does not win you games.
No.
And the Sabres, we know from experience, again, we've been through all of this. We've suffered through all of this. We know what this is like. You don't win games in the league when your goalies are playing like that.
All right, let's finish with some questions here. We'll start with this one from JP Hockey, who we've talked about it on here before, but he just states, Alex Tuch is going to be the next captain of the Buffalo Sabres. I'll toss it to you.
I could see an argument for it, but I really think this organization is grooming Dahlin to be the next captain. When he first got here, I think everyone fell in love with he's a local kid. He's from Syracuse. He's coming in. He's a big piece in the Eichel trade we got back. It's a new era, turning the page, turning to chapter 17 of the rebuild, finally trying to get it done. And I see the argument for that. I could see he's definitely a leader in that locker room. He's definitely a big voice. He's definitely a guy who he'd be a great captain. He'd be something this organization could hang its hat on. But Dahlin has embraced this city like no other player I've seen in a long time, and he's been through it all. Well, most of it. I'd say half of the rebuild / drought tank. But he's been through most of the Eichel era. He's been through so many bad teams. He's stuck it out. He's developed into one of the top defensemen in this league, and the city embraces him, and he embraces the city back. I really think that he is going to be the next captain of this team.
This one's from the Casey Middlestat fan account. And he asked, could you ever see them sitting Okposo?
I'm going to toss it to you for this one.
I will say, yeah, I do.
So do I.
But I think they're holding off until his 1,000th game, which is coming up soon. It's slated to be against Boston at home. And it's a game against an Original Six team at home. That's a good night to have your 1,000th game.
Yeah.
And I don't think they would start load managing before that. And I think it's at the point, and I defended Girgensons and Okposo all season, or all off season. They haven't been good to start. They haven't been what I expected them to be. They've been just like Krebs. They've been kind of mediocre defensively compared to the rest of the team. And in Okposo's case, if he's not providing that, he's not providing much else than morale. So I hope, and I feel like I do think that some healthy scratches are in order once he gets past that 1,000th game. I mean, it helps him. He'll be more juiced and ready to go for whenever they need to call upon him in other games. He'll still be playing more games than he's scratched for, but hey, if every 5 games he sits out one, it's not the end of the world. I know there's a stigma for people that think captains need to be a game in and game out type deal, but professional sports, even just the NHL in general, I feel like it should move more towards the NBA. Not to the point where like superstars are sitting out 15 games, but if your 35-year-old depth winger sits out for one game, is it really the end of the world?
No. I think it just carries more weight because like he has the C on his jersey.
Yeah, he's the captain. I get that. For some people, it's not.
It's interesting.
So this one is from @St. Louis Buffalo fan, and they ask, how long is the leash per se for Clifton? Bryson has looked good when he's played. Could he replace Clifton if he doesn't improve? Here's my thing. I thought Clifton's best game was against Toronto the other night. The numbers really liked him. I thought he played well. And I thought he looked good with power in his debut alongside him. Listen, they signed this guy for 3 years. They like what he brings. I think he's been steadily getting better. I'm not saying he's been showing out as a top 4 defenseman, but I don't think he's going to be a healthy scratch anytime soon. I think Eric Johnson would be one before then, and even then, I don't think he'd be a healthy scratch. He's like Okposo, where clearly he has such a big impact in the room that it translates to the ice.
I also don't think Eric Johnson has made a case for him to get scratched anyway. I think he's extremely important to the penalty kill.
He's very important to the penalty kill. Obviously, 5-on-5, he's not the player.
He's okay.
Yeah, not even okay. Like he's
a washed version of himself.
Yes. So this one is from Rosie, the owner of the Ottawa Senators, just single-handedly taking on that entire fan base. Keep up the great work, Rosie.
It's a treat to watch, yeah.
So this one's actually kind of funny. He asked us right before we started recording, if it's not too late, do you see Krebs being a healthy scratch at some point? And could you talk about the developmental struggles in general, which we touched on?
We went over it, yeah.
So that works out. But he does add, how many games do you envision Ryan Johnson playing this year?
Man, these are tough. These are tough to evaluate. I mean,
it's tough to find a spot for him.
Exactly. It's tough to find a spot for him. I'd say he gets, barring another defensive injury, if Samuelson is still, out currently, I'd say they slide him in over Bryson. Maybe he gets to the point where Samuelson comes back. So hopefully he's not on IR too long. From what I've seen, he's not supposed to be on IR that long. I'm going to say he gets 7-8 games, and then they'll probably send him back.
I think I'm more on the higher end just because it's hockey. There's always injuries. I think I'd probably go higher, maybe closer to 20.
Oh, so you think they don't even send him back?
No, well, I think they will at some point. I just think over the course of the season, injuries happen, and we know he's the first call-up right now. So
yeah,
I think over the course of the year, he gets 20, maybe even close to 30. Who knows? Maybe he makes a case by the end. He's too good to be sent down or something. I don't know. I think, like you said, it depends with Samuelson's injury right now, and it depends on injuries as a whole. It's tough with this. If this lineup is fully healthy, it's tough to find a spot for him. But with injuries, given that it's hockey, there's always probably going to be something there. He'll probably get more. Here's a good one to finish on. This one is from Moosey Egret. They ask, are we a good or bad team?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Well, I mean, I've already made my case that this team is it's a stalling classic car right now, but I say if you look at this roster on paper, they're a good team. I'd say they're more inexperienced than a bad team. And I think that they will find their way.
I think so too. The finishing is starting to come back. The defensive numbers are holding for now. Their 5-on-5 game just has to get back on track. And if the power play can improve, and
if everything can go right.
If everything can go right, then yeah, they are a good team.
But if everything goes wrong, they're a bad team.
It'll be interesting to see, because it hasn't been a storyline, how the goaltending progresses. Because I think we've seen now UPL is not going to be the answer. Like, he's not going to emerge as the starter. And with Comrie's injury, we're back to square one. Like, we need Devin Levi to kind of emerge here as a starting goalie. And he wasn't bad against Toronto. He wasn't good. If they want to be a good hockey team, I think he needs to be better than what he's been. And as a whole, the lineup needs to find its mojo. Hopefully they can now find a lineup that sticks. Hopefully the top line being together and going. Hopefully that solves one issue. You have your top line. Then you can just figure out the rest from there. So thank you for anybody who's sending questions. I apologize if we couldn't get to yours. We talked a bit longer here, and Well, when we're recording this, the Bills are slated to start in 20 or so minutes. So I think we're going to get out of here for now. Looking ahead this week, the Sabres are in Carolina on Tuesday. Minnesota visits them on Friday. And then they're in Pittsburgh on Saturday. So I would assume we'll talk to you guys after the Pittsburgh game at some point. Hopefully everything goes well. Hopefully they can get a streak going here.
Let's get 3 wins going.
Carolina's been pretty vulnerable. Minnesota, very beatable team. And even Pittsburgh, they've been up and down. Even though they just blew out the Sharks 10-2.
The poor Sharks. Man.
But until then, you can follow us on Twitter at the Sabre Report. Also on Instagram at the Sabre Report. If you want updates for the pod, follow us at Sabre Report Pod. You can follow us on TikTok. Subscribe to us on YouTube.